Hey everybody, this is Games Plus James and welcome back to our Unity RPG tutorial series. Now in the last episode we created a little damage burst element which is somewhere around here. I don't know where I left it. But anyway, we created in the last episode to show when we attack our enemies. But there's another element of attacking enemies that's a very common thing in RPG games especially, is to show a little damage number showing how much damage the enemies have taken when you attack them. So we're going to do a very simple and straightforward way to do that in our game here. Okay, so first of all I'm going to delete this damage burst because we've already made a prefab of it, so we don't need it anymore. So we'll just delete it from our scene here. And what we're going to use is the built-in UI stuff within Unity, which is it's very helpful, and it makes things a lot more simple, but it can be a little bit confusing at times. One thing I would recommend is to try and play around with it a lot yourself to kind of get how things work. But for us, we're going to do a very specific thing, so we'll walk through all the steps here now. So what I just did was go to Game Object here and go to UI and select text, and basically that just creates a little text box. If we scroll out like this, we can see it says new text here. And when we create a canvas or a UI element in Unity, it creates this big massive box here, which basically what this represents is the view of the game. So if we go over here, we can see there's nothing there, but if we go back here, we can see that the new text we created is outside this big massive box. So if we were to move that to say here, now that would appear in our world, and if we were to play the game like this, as we move around, we can see the new text. That text stays there. That's the basic way we would use UIs within Unity here. But that doesn't really suit our purposes at all. We want a little bit of a text to come up from our enemies. So if we were to have to work that out to put it in this big massive box, obviously that would be crazy awkward. So what we'll do to change that is if we go to Canvas here, and if we go over to Render Mode, instead of being Screen Space, which is basically what this big box is, if we change this to World Space, this will basically make it so that our text box appears within the world itself. So if we now go and grab this text box again, we click text here, and we move it down so it's in the view of the camera, which is the back, this little box down there. I don't want to zoom in too much just yet, but we'll see, oh no, our text is big, massive, and horribly big, and that's no use to us. So we'll go back in and we'll zoom in here. Okay, and once we're zoomed in just enough here with our to a normal kind of size view, we can see our new text is way too big. That's no good to us. So we need to make some adjustments to the size of things. So what we're going to do is make the canvas itself smaller. So we're going to go to the width up here and set it to be 25 by 25 for width and height. And we want to set the position to be 0, 0. So it's right in the middle here like this. Now we can see our text has gone off to the side somewhere. That's no good to us. So we're going to move that back in a second. One other thing we want to do here is go down to dynamic pixels per unit down here, and we just want to set that to 32. And like I said, a lot of the UI stuff is kind of about playing around with stuff yourself and seeing what you get. But just for now, know that this should be 32. I'll show you what this actually does. Is if we go to our text and set the position of that to be 0 and 0 as well. Actually, I think that will. Where's our text? Oh no, it's over there. Actually, no, sorry. We will leave that at 0, 0. And what we'll do is if we scroll down here and go to alignment and make sure the alignment is centered across horizontally and then vertically also centered. So then we have it right here in the middle. But if we go back to our dynamic pixels per unit, you can see we've got nice like clean edges on everything here. If we put this back to being 1, everything goes blurry. So basically, as we increase this, the image itself gets sharper, which is kind of what we would like to have, a nice sharp image. So what we want to do next, actually before we're going to go any further, we want to delete this event system down here. Now this is automatically created whenever you create a new when you create a new canvas. which is when you add something into UI here, and basically that's used for controlling. Say if you're using like a menu or something, if we have event system highlighted here, we've got a horizontal axis, vertical, submit, cancel, but we're not doing any of that with just some numbers that pop up. So we're just going to delete that because we don't need it. And okay, so we got our canvas all set up. If we go into text here, we also want to make this kind of small as well. So we're going to make that the same width and height, 25 by 25. And if we scroll down here, let's just put some blank text in. We'll just call this 99 just for the sake of having some numbers in there. We have it centered. We're going to change the size of the font because obviously this is way too big. So we're going to just drag this down to 0, I think is actually what I had it set at. But again, like I said, it's kind of about trial and error with this stuff. As a lot of it is just seeing what kind of effect you think it has. If we just switch to game view here, we'll see that 99, that font size there is kind of roughly what we want coming out of a player. Obviously we don't want it to be black either, because that not that would be a bad thing, I suppose, but kind of typically you see these numbers being like in white coming off characters. So we'll stick with the normal kind of default design and slap a color like that onto it. Go back to our scene view here. Okay, I'm just going to move it over to here just so we can see it a bit better rather than being hidden behind the camera here. Okay, one other thing that we want to do is make sure that it will appear above everything else. So at the moment, if we move it as well, move our text, we can see it's behind the trees here. That's no good, because what if we had an enemy that died here and our numbers floated up behind a tree? That's no good. Actually, I just realized I moved the text, but I should have moved the canvas to get it somewhere else in the world. Okay, so we don't want it to be behind anything else, so the way we can fix that is on our canvas here, if we go to sorting layer, and we're going to add a new sorting layer that we're going to call UI, like that, and then we'll go back to our canvas, click on sorting layer again, and now we have the UI option, and we'll hit there like that. So now that's going to be in front of everything else. So if we move it down here, we can see it's above the trees, so it won't be getting hidden behind anything like that, which is perfect, and that's exactly what we want to happen. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of setting up our little numbers. So we'll actually rename this to damage numbers. No, not damab. That was bad. Ooh. There we go. Okay, and we want to make this a prefab, so we're going to drag this into our prefab folder like that, because what we're going to be doing is, obviously we want our enemies, whenever they get take some damage, we want it to pop up these numbers. So we're going to make it instantiate a new version of this whenever we attack an enemy. So to control our numbers, because again, when we see these numbers flash up, we don't want it to just pop up exactly where it is. Kind of typically how these are presented is they kind of slowly rise up and then they disappear. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to go to our scripts folder and create a new script, new C# script that we're going to call floating numbers. Okay, and then we're going to open this up in MonoDevelop. And basically this is going to control, like I said, the numbers moving up into the air, but it's also going to control the actual number that's shown on the screen, because obviously we don't want it to just say 99 every time. So we're going to need to know, like I said, we're going to need to know the speed that's moving up. So we'll say a public float speed, like that. Or actually no, we'll just call it move speed, would make more sense, wouldn't it? Okay, and then we want to control, we want to know what actual amount of damage we'll have. So we'll say a public int damage number, and that's going to be decided by whatever's doing the attack is going to tell this script what that damage number will be, but we'll cover that in a few minutes. And the other thing we want to do is to use the UI system and actually display it on the text box that we've created. And to do that, we need to go up here above all this stuff, and below, using system.collections, and we're going to type using Unity Engine dot UI, and that enables you to be able to access the UI elements within Unity, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to access any of this stuff at all. So we'll go public text. Sorry, I was blanking on it for a second. Public text, and we'll call this the display number. Okay, so basically all we have to do then is we want to make sure that whatever number is being displayed is whatever damage was given. So in our update thing, we're just going to say our display number, which is the text object itself here, is equal. We want it to be equal to what our damage number is. But the problem is, because this is a text box, we're dealing with a thing in Unity called a string, and a string is basically just a collection of letters or numbers or anything like that, basically spelling out like a sentence, for example. But by default, a string cannot just automatically be an int, so we can't just say this text. Actually, I just realized this should be our display number, and we should say dot text, because we're talking about this object, but we want to make changes to the text within it. That should just be small text, dot text, like that. Yeah, because we want to make changes to that, we can't just say, okay, well that's equal to a number. So what we have to do is type two little quotation marks like that, and then a plus, and then damage number. And what that does, essentially, this is just starting a new. You can think of it as a sentence, basically, but there's no actual words in there. And then we're saying, okay, we want to add whatever these numbers are. We're going to put that in. We could say, for example, if we were to type in a plus and then a quotation mark and then a space and say damage, then say if we're doing 5 damage, we'll get on the screen something saying 5 damage, but we don't want to add that in. We just want it to say 5. Okay, so we'll see that in action now in a minute. And the next thing we want to do is we want to make it slowly float up as it's going. So the way we will do that is just by saying transform dot position is equal to new vector tree. So we wanted to go upwards, so we wanted to go on the y-axis. So our x-axis will just be the same, so it'll be just transform dot position dot x, and then a comma, and then we'd have our transform dot position dot y, and that shouldn't be a capital T. And what we want to do is add on to that. So what we're going to say is we're just going to add on how fast we're moving up, which is our move speed, multiplied by time dot delta time. So we want to make sure we put a little bracket here and say our move speed multiplied by time dot delta time. So as we've covered time dot delta time before, but basically it's just the amount of time between each frame of animation. So it'll be, say our move speed is 5, it'll be multiplied by 0.01 of a second or whatever, so it'll end up being 0.5. But it'll only be moving a little bit at a time, and it'll keep it nice and consistent for us then. So that'll be our y value going up, and again, obviously our z value, we want to keep that the exact same. So transform dot position dot z. Perfect. So now if we save this and go back into our game here and go to our damage numbers, so wait for that to compile, and that should be just about done there. And then we're going to add that component back onto it. So we're going to add our floating numbers. So we want to have it moving up a certain amount. I'm just going to set this to 1 for now. Damage number, just by default, we're going to have it at 5 because, or no, we'll just put it at something higher, say 33. Just because we want to have a testing value here. but when they're actually being created in the game, we're going to have them be generated by when we attack something. And then finally, we need to make sure that the display number object is the right one. So we'll just grab our text box from here and slide that into place there. So now if we hit play, what we should get, actually this is going to jump around the world. So just for the moment, I'm just going to make this a child of the player, because we want it to be, we want it to appear near the player when we start our game. So we should get it saying 33 and floating up the screen. So there we go, we got our 33 and it's slowly rising up like that. Now obviously if you wanted to go faster or slower, just change your move speed. We set it to 2. Kind of whatever you want to do yourself, obviously. It can work nicely. Okay, so it's floating up like that, but I'm going to just drag that out from being a child, just drag it down to the bottom, because we don't want it to be a child forever. And obviously it's floating up like that, but we don't want it to keep floating forever and ever. We want this object to disappear. And this is something that we also want to do with our damage burst object that we created as a prefab already as well. We don't want it to last forever, or else if we keep generating these things, they'll just fill up our hierarchy here and just take up too much space. So we're going to write another very simple script that we're going to create here, and we're just going to call this one destroy over time. And we'll open this up here in MonoDevelop, and this one is basically, it's just going to count down for a certain number, from a certain number, and once it finishes counting down, it'll destroy whatever object it's attached to. So here we're going to say a public float time to destroy, like that. And then in our update loop, it's just going to be time to destroy, right? Time to destroy minus equals time dot delta time. So it'll take off the time dot delta time every frame of animation. And then we're just going to say here, if our time to destroy is less than or equal to 0, then inside of our curly brackets, we're going to say destroy, destroy bracket game object. And that'll delete whatever game object this script is attached to. So we're going to save that, go back into here, go to our damage numbers, and again, once this finishes compiling down here, once it goes, there we go. So we're going to add our destroy over time script to this. Time to destroy, we're going to give it like 1.5 seconds, say. I think that should be plenty of time. Maybe just even 1 second actually. So we're just going to apply the changes to that, because we've made a few changes now and we want them to be applied to our prefab exactly. So we're going to hit play again. And now, oh, we didn't make it a child again. That's why we jumped off to the side. So we're just going to make it a child again, just so it will appear on the screen for us. So we're going to hit play. And we'll see it float up and then disappear. That's exactly what we want. And it's gone from our hierarchy here. It's not just gone invisible or anything like that. But if we walk over to one of these guys, just as an example here, we start attacking them, we start doing a damage burst, but we can see we're getting all these damage bursts here over at the side, and that's not what we want happening at all. So we want to be able to get rid of them the exact same, and to do that, we'll just go to our prefab, go to our damage burst, scroll down, and we're going to add the same destroy over time script. And because we know the lifetime of this one, if we go up here, is just 0.25, so we know it's 0.25, so then we can just wait 0.5 of a second and it'll destroy each one. And we don't have to apply any changes there now. We know that they're automatically applied. So if we go back in here and go attack an enemy, if we can actually manage to get near him, there we go. We can see they're not filling up the over on the side here. We get one appearing and then it goes fairly quickly. So that's all fine and dandy. But now we need to actually make our attacks create these little numbers. So the way we're going to do that is when our sword attacks something in our hurt enemy script, we're going to want to add something that generates this little prefab that we've made, much like we did to generate the damage burst. So we're going to open up that script in our hurt enemy one, and go over to here. Okay, and then on our hurt enemy script here, we're going to need to know what object is that we're creating. So we're going to say here public game object damage number, and that's the object that we're going to create, which is our damage number prefab thing. Actually, I'm just going to move this back down here so it's no longer child of player. And then what we want to do is, instead of just going instantiate and instantiating this thing, we actually want to make a specific clone of this object that we can make a change to, because what we're going to want to change is the value that we're given to it. So we're going to say here var clone, and the reason we say var clone is just because var is just short for variable, and it's just like a blank variable that Unity kind of just knows that we're going to create something here. We don't know exactly what it is just yet, so we're just going to say var clone. We're just saying we're going to create an object called a clone. We're not saying what exact kind of object that is just yet. So here we're just going to say var clone is equal to instantiate. So we're going to instantiate is our damage number. Damage number. And we need to give it a position. So we'll just use the exact same thing we did before of using the hit point. So our hit point dot position. And then we need to give it a certain rotation, but because our sword will be at different angles when we're attacking our enemies, it could be facing left or right or up or down. We want to make sure that we're hitting, we just want it to be a basic default 0 value. So normally if we wanted to do that for position, for example, we would just say a vector tree dot 0, but because rotations are kind of weird and they have their own kind of way of doing things, we can't just do an x, y, and a z value of rotation. They're actually just these things called quaternions, and they're kind of complicated to wrap your head around. So rather than delving into that, we're just going to say quaternion dot Euler, EULER, and then in a bracket we're going to say vector tree dot 0. So basically what a quaternion has, like 4 number values to define a rotation, but using the Euler function will change it so that it will take a tree number value, so an x, y, and a z value, much like we have back here in Unity. We have, if we go to our player, for example, we have an x, y, and a z value for a rotation. So we want to use that, and we want it to be 0, 0, 0, so it's pointing straight up, and we just convert that into a quaternion here like this. And we actually need 2 closing brackets to close this one, and then our semicolon at the end. And then so what's happening here is this whole little thing here is creating an object for us to use in the game, but what we actually want to use is a specific game object rather than just a generic object, which are 2 slightly different things within Unity. But because we know we want to be able to make a change to a game object, because we're actually going to mess around with a component of it now in a second, what we want to put in front of instantiate here is just inside a bracket we want to say game object. And what this will do, although this creates a generic kind of object, it will transform this into a game object that we're going to use as our clone. So it's kind of, it sounds complicated, but it's relatively straightforward. It's just something you need to do, basically. You just need to remember to do it when you're doing something like this. So then on our clone that we just created right here, we're going to say clone dot get component, and what we're going to get on the component is the floating number script, because we know that's attached to the object we just created. So our floating numbers, and then we're going to say dot damage number. So that's, if we go back to our floating numbers here, The damage number is the number that we're applying and that we're showing on the screen. So we're just going to say, okay, that damage number should be equal to whatever damage to give our sword has. So we'll say damage to give there, and then put our semicolons, and then we're going to save this, pop back into our game, and then on our sword here, once it compiles, we'll have a slot here for our damage numbers to appear. Cool. And then what am I looking at? Prefabs, here we go. We'll drag our damage numbers into that slot, and now if we hit play, what we should get when we attack an enemy, we know that our damage to give based on the sword at the moment is 5. So if we attack this enemy, we get a little 5 popping up, and it disappears off into the sky, and then is removed from the world. Oh, I'm missing things badly here. There we go. Oh, I killed myself, but I did hit the enemy, and we got our little numbers appearing up in the air just like that. So there you go. That's the basics of creating a relatively simple little number system to kind of make it feel more like an RPG game, that we're actually seeing some numbers and stats popping around the place. So we'll have to, soon enough, we'll have to start adding some actual stats like strength and stuff like that to our player, so that we can have different damage numbers coming up every time. We don't want it to just be 5 every time we attack something, but that's something to be covered in the future. For now, thanks for watching this episode, and I'll be back soon with some more RPG tutorial goodness.